Now it's time for perspective, and a high-level summit is being held in Nigeria with the aim of countering terrorism across Africa. Now, the conference is looking at the priorities to tackle it as it's co-hosted by the UN and the Nigerian president. Comes as well as the ability of foreign governments to help in the fight against extremists across Africa is becoming increasingly difficult. French troops were in 5 former French colonies as part of Operation Barkhane, no longer though in Mali, Burkina Faso or Niger after being effectively forced out by the country's new leaders following coups. Well, joining us now from Oslo is Professor of International Relations at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences, Stig Jarle Hansen. He's also author of Horn, Sahel and Rift, Fault Lines of the African Jihad. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme. The conference then has heard that the situation is particularly dire in the Sahel region of North Africa, the region now accounting for almost half of all deaths from terrorism globally. Would you say that with the ejection of these international troops, notably those French troops, have extremist groups been able to take even more of a hold in this region, do you think?
I think they have. And what we also seen is that the Malian authorities have perhaps become less reconciliatory with other fractions also in the Malian north. So it emboldened the Malian forces perhaps to look away from negotiation solutions with some of the Tuareg fractions in the north that have contributed to this. But when that is said, we have to understand that also the French troops were rather seen as passive and not strong enough to basically protect civilians. So there was some kind of anger at the French forces there because they didn't contribute to any strategic victories since the start of their deployment back in 2013, 2014, where they were crucial in preventing then the jihadists from actually taking the capital.
It sounds like what you're saying is the blame lies on two sides. It's not quite as simple as a vacuum being left because those forces have come out.
Yes, there need to be a proper inquiry into Western doctrines and Western counterinsurgency theory. And there wasn't any strategic victories that France scored after 2013, 2014. And this is very important. A lot of Malians, but also a lot of area experts talked about forever wars. And then the Russians were seen as some kind of replacement that could add some momentum to the counterinsurgency, but I also think that the Russians have a lot of problems in when they are fighting together with the Malian forces. But if I might add, what's interesting here now is this three-parted game that is played out. Western forces are vying for support as counterinsurgency experts versus the Russians. So there's a kind of Cold War going on in the Sahel, parallel to the counterinsurgency against the jihadists. And on top of that, you will have local quests for autonomy. And also basically local conflicts that spill over when you have jihadists entering into local conflicts and taking sides.
And presumably the fear is as well that if the governments or the coup leaders in these countries are unable to control these groups, that they could spread and start influencing other countries. I'm thinking notably of Ghana and Nigeria itself, where this conference is being held.
I think that is actually likely to happen. That's my rather gloomy view, because the Russians also commit a lot of mistakes. They directly, seemingly, at least there's a lot of press coverage when there are stories on how the Russians target civilians much more extensively than other forces. And as I said, it emboldened the Malian government to go away from seeking reconciliation versus other fractions that are non-jihadi, and that will weaken the Malian government in the long run. And we also see that the Russians now have made some leeway in influencing Chad, but Chad is still hanging in the balance and is still a crucial player in preventing the jihadists. But we don't know how Chad will end up in the future. Will it be more pro-Russian, or will it be with the West, or perhaps some kind of neutral position? This is not clear now. So it's going to be a lot of possibilities for changes in this region in the future.
Looking at a summary of what's been said at the conference so far, it didn't seem like, although there were calls for more regional cooperation, that kind of thing, but there didn't seem to be any kind of magic bullet or anything like that to solve these problems. Is there anything that can be done to bring things back in the other direction?
Frankly, it's going to be hard, because we see that you need some kind of African support mechanism. You need to have Africans willing to fight and support some of these countries. So far, it seems like Chad have been acting like a kind of a regional hegemon and been quite active in fighting it, but Chad also have limitations to its capacity. Other countries as Ghana, but also Rwanda has been spoken of, are reluctant into entering basically fighting counterinsurgency in the Sahel. So there seem to be a lack of African cooperation here, and a lot of distrust because of the new kind of Cold War cleavages between the Russian local supporters and perhaps more Western local supporters.
ECOWAS unable to do anything?
Absolutely. I think they will be unable to do anything. And the irony here is Nigeria, who in the 90s was seen as the military strong African hegemon, who is not really able to provide safety to even its own north, let alone winning in the north against the Islamic State's West African province, and also the remains of the old Boko Haram that split off from the Islamic State West African province.
In your book, Horn, Sahel and Rift, you also talk of the fear of such groups spreading even further, asking if their ambitions even spread out of Africa. Do you think that's a real risk?
I think these groups are fluid. What we see with JNIM is that they have been very reluctant in talking about attacks in Europe. In fact, they issued a statement saying that they will not attack France inside France. So there has been a reluctance from some of these organizations. But, when they gain a lot of territory, if they're going to gain a lot of territory, this might change. And we also seen the Islamic State in Sahara. We've seen the Islamic State in West Africa. None of these entities have a tradition of planning attacks in Europe, but we've seen some of these states making aggressive claims to the extent, and there might be some will to target Western targets in Africa, as we've seen before, for example, in Amenas attack.
Stig Jarle Hansen, good to talk to you on the programme today. That's Stig Jarle Hansen joining us from Oslo, author of the book Horn, Sahel and Rift, Fault Lines of the African Jihad. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.